This is the Bigger Pockets Podcast, show 728.
I feel like Airbnb is in the fifth inning, right? It's been around for a while. They're pushing experiences now, unique properties, and going back to baseball terms, like I feel like the medium-term rental space, like the umpires are barely walking the field. They're just chalking the field. Grounds crews out. Like that's how early we are in the game. And the sooner that you get in, the better you build your foundations, the likelihood of you being able to succeed in the space is tremendous.
What's going on, everyone? This is David Green, your host of the Bigger Pockets Real Estate Podcast, the biggest, the best, the baddest real estate podcast in the world. Here today with my good friend and talented co-host, Rob Abasolo. Now, we have one of the best episodes we've ever done for you today. And I'm not exaggerating. It's that good. You're going to listen to it more than once. It's going to inspire you. You're going to go follow the listener and you're going to think, gosh darn it, that's why I listen to this podcast. When you get that feeling, please do me a favor and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you listen to this, because we really need those and you're going to love it. Today's quick tip before we get to the guest is look for creative ways to exercise your leads. Our guest today tells you about different ways of finding guests for different asset classes of properties that you probably never thought of, but he is making more than 10 times some of his competition by looking for ways to do it. Make sure you listen to today's episode all the way to the end because you are not going to want to miss this. It is subtle yet brilliant. Rob, anything you want to say before we get started?
I have a feeling that if you listen to this all the way through, you will probably listen to it again. This is one of those episodes that I think people will reference for many years to come. I'm so excited. This is one of my favorite, legitimately, that we've ever done.
Yeah, I ended up asking our guest today if he wants to coach me on the topic of today's show. And so hopefully he does, and we come back and you guys can follow along with the journey of me trying to implement Jesse's method. So without any further ado, we're going to jump right into our interview with Jesse Vasquez.
Jesse, welcome to the show. To give our listeners some background, you run a full-time mid-term rental or medium-term rental business, rather, that caters to healthcare workers. You've hacked this market segment and are here to give all of your secrets to our Bigger Pockets audience. Your business includes 27 properties in Texas, Oakland, and the Central Valley, and you're a self-described go-giver. Did I miss anything?
Oh, man, that sounds pretty damn perfect.
Oh, and also you're a fellow YouTuber, right?
I am, man. Yeah, so I've been able to build a beautiful business, you guys, from both midterm rentals and short-term rentals and co-hosting other people's midterm rentals, and specifically in the Central Valley, in the Bay Area, David, wherever you're at, San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, all those beautiful places in the Bay. And even though the prices are high there, we still are able to get a pretty solid amount of income in a high market, which is difficult to do in a lot of places. So that's pretty much it, man. I worked in healthcare for 18 years. So
what'd you do in healthcare specifically?
Yeah, I was actually a business development manager. So it's a fancy way of saying sales. So I was a sales rep for a hospital, for companies. My job was to get, permission for these doctors to have privileges at a hospital. And also for patients that were discharging, my job was to connect and schmooze with these case managers to get them to use me to send folks home. Like if they needed, so David, imagine if you fell, God forbid that happens, you broke your hip, and Rob, you are the case manager. My job was to be buddies with you so that you would send me David as a referral, and then I would get paid on that end. So yeah, it was a really cool business. It paid me really well. I was making over $200,000 a year. I had golden handcuffs at that time in my life. And I finally decided, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. Plus I was driving to the Bay Area from the Central Valley. And for those of you who know, it's literally, Dave, you probably know Modesto.
Oh yeah. I'm from Manteca, which is 20 minutes away from Modesto.
Holy smokes. Yeah. We're neighbors. So literally driving from Manteca, Modesto to the Bay Area literally daily I'm not kidding you guys, is a 3.5 to sometimes even 4-hour drive, depending on what day you decide to go, what accidents and whatnot. So for me, it was just burning me out. That drive was killing me. And I just decided one day I went into work, I'm just done. I'm going to just go full in on investing in real estate and midterm rentals.
This is fascinating. Also, you can still catch me in Modesto at the Vintage Fair Mall once every 2 years when I have to go shopping for new clothes. That's the best deals around. So this is interesting because as people are going to see later on in the interview, these sales skills that you developed in this business development role have come in incredibly crucial for you when it comes to running a medium-term rental business. And so this stuff is going to come full circle. That's really good. Before we hear about your freaking empire that you've been building, tell me about your first real estate experience as a kid.
Yeah. So all right, you guys have all seen National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, right? I'm assuming?
Yes.
All right, so you know that Woody, that station wagon? So I need you guys to picture this. Me being a 9-year-old kid in the back seat of this wool. There's literally wool upholstery in the car. My mom and dad were in the front seat, and my parents were arguing as we were on our way to the courthouse. They were arguing because they had tenants that were living in the property that didn't want to move. They were like literally not moving. That's my first introduction to real estate. And I remember thinking like, holy crap, like I don't ever want to be in real estate, because here I am as a 9-year-old boy sitting in the back of a courthouse with my parents and this lady that was renting from them. And you know the crazy thing, David and Rob, the judge looked at her and said, this is not the first time this lady's been in here. And I remember her name like specifically. I'm not going to use it on the show, but he said this is what she does. So it's literally she would go and stay at people's places, take advantage of them, not pay their rent for months, and then eventually go into court, and then that's what it was. So it was literally just repeating the cycle.
So that clearly had an impact on the way you decided to structure your real estate business. Before we hear about that, I just want to commend you. Props for not saying, oh, there's a bad thing with real estate, I'm just going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just screw it. There was a bad experience. So many people take that approach. Instead, you were smart enough to say, well, how do I eliminate the problem and maintain all the benefits? So you figured out a way to structure things to where the tenants had less ability to professionally screw you over. So like, let's hear, how did you first come up with the idea to invest in real estate the way you do now?
Yep. Yeah. So this is going to take me back to what I did at my W-2 job. I was working on the floors of the hospital, and in California, you guys know everybody says dude and bro and man. David, Rob, you're in Texas. You don't know. I guess you're here from California.
They say y'all in Texas.
Y'all. So there was this really sweet lady. Her name was Barbara. And I was working at the hospital, and there was a little, we were on the floor, and she was saying things like, oh, don't you know? And such a doll. And I'm just like, holy crap, where's this accent? Like, I love this. Where are you from? And she's like, Fargo. And I was like, cool, I watched the show. Like, I get it now. Or I watched the movie. This was a while back. And 2015, by the way. And I was like, what are you doing here? And Barb was like, I'm a travel nurse. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, where are you staying? And you guys are not going to believe where she was staying. And Dave, you might know this because you are from Modesto. She was staying at Motel 6 on 9th Street, downtown Modesto.
Why?
Because it's not a place where a travel medical professional, especially a nurse, is going to feel comfortable. And I asked her, this is my follow-up question, how much are you paying for that place? She was paying $3,000 a month for Motel 6. That's what the rent was for her to pay. And at that time, this is 2015, I could buy a property for under 300 grand. My payment would be $1,600, and they're paying $3K. So my brain was like, boom, I need to do this right now. How do I figure out how to do this? She started to talk to me about contracts, which I already knew about. And everything in healthcare, you guys, whether you're a doctor, nurse, clinician, physical therapist, everything goes around contracts. Housing is not any different. It's everything in healthcare is based around contracts. So I walked down to the HR department, knocked on the door and said, hey, I've noticed all these clinicians that are travelers here. How do I actually become like a housing solutions provider for these folks? Because they're all staying at this crappy place. And the hospital, Doctors Medical Center, by the way, David, was like, oh, we're actually looking for housing. Like, how do we want to accommodate housing? What property do you have? And at that point, I was just like, tractor beams, real estate. I didn't even own my own house yet. And I went and bought an investment property. So that's kind of how it started.
My cousin is a nurse at Doctors Hospital in Modesto. Really? We have a lot in common here, Jesse. That's funny.
What's going on here?
So this is, we're kind of glossing over it, but that's brilliant that you recognize the problem, that you saw a solution, that you just said, I can buy a house for $1,500 or $1,600 a month. The nurse is going to be happy to pay $3,000 to have a house and not have to live in downtown Modesto. That area's gotten even worse if you've been there lately. It's kind of like overrun with transits at this point. So like they're not going to even feel safe leaving the hotel to get to their car is what I'm getting at. And they're probably doing this at nurses' hours, right? So graveyard shift, swing shift, they're coming in and out in the dark. It's terrible. And they don't have their own space. Like, when you're staying in hotels like of ill repute, the type of noises you're going to have to hear and the screaming and the yelling and just the overall chaos. And nurses need a place where they can find some peace and respite from the insanity that they're dealing with. So you see all these things and it just clicks like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. Do you think that your parents' background in real estate had something to do with your confidence level to say like, okay, I can jump in and meet this need in a business way?
Yeah, definitely, man. I think I think somehow subconsciously that burned into my brain. Like, I need to get paid. I need to make sure I get paid up front. And then also my dad would always tell me like real estate is where most people make their millions. Like you want to build, it's basically like a long-term bank account is what he told me. Verbatim, that's exactly what he said. He's like, you buy a property, you rent it. It's just like having a large bank account that's going to eventually pay you in dividends over years. It's not like that you make money right away. Real estate's not like that, right? It's a long game. So he essentially burned that into me as a child, like buy real estate, but don't end up like me in court every 6 months. And he knew he was in that specific space. So yeah, 100%. My brain was like, how do I do this? How do I grow? But how do I get paid? Every single one of these hospital floors, guess what was there? Bunch of Fargo accents, don't you know? And, stuff like that. And so I realized, like, holy crap, the Central Valley has such a need for clinicians. In fact, California, Illinois, Texas, North Carolina, and Florida are they're 5 underserved states for travel medical professionals, and they're not going to be to pre-pandemic levels until 2030. So if you guys are in one of those states, you have a long roadway to build a legitimate business that is housing clinicians, because there's not going to be enough clinicians until 2030 is what the National Registry of Travel Medical Professionals is predicting.
And you've just ruined those states for us by saying that on the podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
Thanks, Jesse.
So, Jesse, bring us back a little bit, because you stated that you were making really good money at your previous job, or at the job that you were working, the W-2, multiple 6 figures, and it is golden handcuffs, right? You're making money, very comfortable. You're probably past that threshold where, yeah, it's like you're very comfortable and you can probably buy whatever you want within reason and travel and do all that kind of stuff. And so the difficult thing with making that amount of money is that when you start going into real estate, you have to try to replace all that money that you're making at your W-2 with real estate, which at that level takes a long time. So tell us about that shift and that transition.
Yeah, I had success with fulfillment. Like, I was happy. I mean, I was not happy with the job, but I was happy getting the paycheck. But for me, man, it was like, I just didn't want to do that grind anymore. I was just done. And one day I literally went into work and I'm just like, I'm not doing this anymore. I gave my resignation letter. They let me go that same day. And literally that was July 17th at 3:43 p.m. I was in San Francisco. I know the exact time, date, everything. I know what I was wearing. Like, I remember it vividly, you guys, vividly. And from that point on, my family was like, Dave and Rupp, they were like, you were insane. Like, why would you ever do that? I remember my daughter, who was like 17 at the time, 16, called my mom and she's like, my dad just quit his job. We're going to be homeless. Like, literally, my daughter called and told my mom this. Because in Hispanic families, you tell the moms, the grandmas, everything, and then they're going to get on me and I'm going to be like, oh God, why'd I do this? So that's what happened. Like, literally everybody in my family was like, you're so dumb. Like, why are you doing this? And now they're just like, you were right on. We were supporting you the whole time. We knew you could do it. So it's tough, man.
Yeah. And so you go into this, you decide to transition to it. Obviously, the timing of going into real estate is always like, you just never really know until you make that decision and you march into the office. Tell us a little bit more about how your family took that.
Yeah. So Hispanic families are very like, you go into a job, you work your butt off, then you move up to manager, and then you move up to this, you climb that corporate ladder. So my parents were 100% like, that's what you need to do. Like, what are you doing? So it was not an easy transition. I think that the first few months, it was kind of like, I had money saved, by the way, you guys. I had like 6 months of like cash reserves, and probably even a little bit more than that, so that if it didn't work, I can always go get a job somewhere else. Like, I've been in this space for so many years that I can literally go get a job. Even today, like, I can go get a job right now if I wanted to. So for me, my brain was like, if I don't do this, or if I don't try this, then I'm not going to have any success, and I'm going to resent this later on in life. Granted, I did give up a $200K a year job, but I mean, right after I did that, you guys, like, everything just like took off. I started teaching people what I was doing, and that was successful. And then my portfolio was, growing. My life has completely changed. I'm working way more than I ever have, but I'm also making way more than I ever even dreamed about making. And it's just been such a beautiful ride. And not only that, but inspiring other people that are in these spaces like Modesto and the Central Valley and places all over the U.S. are not big. Like, you don't have to be in these big urban markets to do extremely well. You can be in a very underserved small market and have a pretty good amount of doors and build an actual legitimate business based off of relationships. And I think that's where, a lot of people can really drive home this specific model.
So you mentioned that you're making more money than you ever have before. Can you give us a quick rundown of what your business stands look like today, how many units you're managing, and the revenue they're providing?
Yeah, so right now I have 9 properties that I own. I just did my books, and we did about $987,000, and that's gross in just 9 properties. And then I manage for other people, and we're doing over $1 million. That's short-term and midterm off of 11 other properties. So between the combination of these two, we're doing 2.1 million. And then my coaching business is like, that thing's going crazy right now. And so just the combination of all those things. And just keep in mind, you guys, when I talk about these numbers, those are gross numbers. The revenue, if you own properties, it's usually, 40, 50, 60% is what you have to, what I get to keep, what I actually get to keep. But with midterm rentals, there's not as much turnover, or medium-term rentals, there's not as much turnover. There's not as much products that you need to use in these properties. So we have less kind of, and Rob, I've heard you mention this before. I feel there's less wear and tear with having actual medium-term rentals in my specific place. So, yeah, it's been fantastic. This last, couple of years, just the growth.
Yeah, for sure. The wear and tear aspect of medium-term rentals, when I first started doing it, I was doing it incorrectly because I was really only cleaning after that guest checked out. So if a guest was there for 3 months and we cleaned it, it was a disaster. But now what I've done is I send cleaners in every month now to do a checkup and to fix anything that might to basically point anything out that might need to be fixed. For example, my cleaner just went over to one of my midterm rentals last week, and there was a mailbox that's attached to my house that was just on the ground. And she was like, "Hey, this is broken." And I was like, "All right, I wish the tenants would have told me that." So sent my handyman. So it's a good way to help avoid some of that wear and tear. Do you have anything like that you do for your midterm rentals, or do you just let them play out their entire lease?
Yeah, man, there's a lot of things we do with our midterm rentals. So going back to the contract, connecting with agencies, and maybe we can drop in this in a second, but we have car rentals. So a nurse can literally hop on a plane, end up in San Francisco or Oakland, get an hour Uber into Modesto. As they check in, they have a car in the garage waiting for them. We had a grocery delivery service, like clinicians or resident doctors that are there will actually go deliver groceries that they want, kind of like a Shipt and Instacart. Before that, we were doing that. We're still doing that now. So literally all they would do is work, and we were supplying literally everything they needed from point A to point B. And I think this is where you start building relationships, like with the recruiters of these agencies. Their jobs are to place people in these specific jobs. And if I'm able to be a person that solves problems for them, then they're going to use me every time.
That's really cool. You're a very turnkey solution, basically. Like, you're not just housing, you are also transportation and effectively food. And I think obviously there's a lot of value there. It's really, really smart. I don't think, a lot of hosts and a lot of people in this space tend to really just stop at what they consider to be their quote unquote job. But this really does seem to provide a solution. So if you wouldn't mind, can you walk us through a little bit how you structure your business?
Yeah. So I'll kind of break things down for you. So we would go out and do all these things so that these folks would literally go back to the recruiters and say, "Holy smokes, Jesse literally takes care of everything." So once those recruiters find out about that stuff, that's where I'm actually building market share with these actual companies. And I'm actually building a business that I don't need to rely on Airbnb. I don't need to rely on Furnish Finder. I don't need to rely on all these people. Like, I am creating my own business. And if I eventually want to sell my properties, you guys, guess what I get to sell? Not only my tangible real estate, but also my contracts, my actually legitimate business. So I think that a lot of people kind of think about real estate and they're just like, "Oh, cool, this is just like a tangible house or a property." But there's other things that you can actually build that make a business. And that's being one of them.
All right, so you're talking about the contract aspect of this. Walk us through getting a contract, because obviously you worked at a hospital and you walked into the HR like we talked about, but the everyday person can't just, not without being escorted out by security, but they can't just walk in the hospital and go into the HR department. So how can the everyday person go about snagging a contract like this?
Yeah, an everyday person can go into the hospital and knock on the HR department. First off, you can definitely do that. But
okay,
the smarter way would be to just call the hospital, ask for the HR department, and just say, "Hey, can you tell me what agencies you're working with that are on the healthcare side? Is there any specific companies you're connected to? And secondary, is there a recruiter that's attached to you guys that you guys need for housing?" I'm just giving you an example. I'm going to say 5 properties in the specific market. I want to be a solutions provider specifically for them. 9 out of 10 times you'll have a HR department that will say, "Yeah, we use one company, AMN Healthcare or True Staff, whatever those are. And our recruiter is, Barbara." I'm going to use Barbara again. Cool. That gives me some really good information. Now guess what I could do? I can literally call that company. I can talk to Barbara and say, "Hey, I got referred to you from DMC. They're telling me that you guys are connected. I actually have properties here. Is there a way that you and I can connect and actually create a contract for these clinicians to come?" So, and if they don't answer you that way, guess what I can do secondary? I can now, we're talking about business, right? I can now go on LinkedIn and I can connect directly with that company, connect to Barbara with her last name on LinkedIn, and there's my backdoor to getting this specific contract. Again, everything's about building relationships, and you got to think about it just like if you're dating. Everything's very slow. It takes time. It takes energy. It takes consistency. But once you do that, you guys, and you're able to build an actual contract with these agencies, you can get paid every time. You get paid up front, sometimes 3 months at a time. So first, last, and deposit. And you can really actually build a legitimate business. And these agencies will go to you every single time. And you don't have to rely on Airbnb or, again, we talk about Furnish Finder. We'll dive into that in a bit, but you can just build a legitimate business this way by just literally building relationships, which is not an easy thing to do, but it's possible. And we can all do it now on Furnish Finder. There's something called unmatched leads, and this is going to be a good tip for everybody listening right now. Take note of this. If you get on Furnish Finder, there is leads that come in and there's unmatched leads. All you have to literally do is pick up the phone and dial every single one of those nurses and let them know what you're doing. Ask for their recruiter and what agency they work with. And that's literally how you could build your business for free. Like, you don't have to pay anything, to do this. You can literally do it for free. So that's another way that folks can get into this space by going after these agencies, is by going on Furnish Finder.
And what exactly, I need some clarity. When you say agency, like you said, call the HR department at the hospital and you say, hey, what agencies are you working with? Can you just clarify what kind of agency are you talking about? Like a staffing agency?
Yeah, so every hospital does not have enough clinicians to meet the demand of patients. We talked about this a minute ago. Central Valley doesn't have enough clinicians to meet the demand for patients. In the Central Valley, David, you might know this, there's a lot of high acuity patients, which means a lot of folks here are sick. Compared to the Bay Area, it's worse in the Valley. So there's just not enough nurses to meet the demand. So these hospitals have to outsource to be able to bring more clinicians in, and they have to outsource with agencies. And those hospitals typically have contracts with, like, say, AMN Healthcare, which is national, they're huge. True Staff, which is another big giant company. Aya Healthcare is another big giant company. They're national. So they'll have one recruiter or two recruiters that literally the hospitals will deal with. So if the hospital gives you that information, then you can now reach out as a third party person and say, hey, I just got your information from the HR person at the hospital. Here's her name. How do I connect with you? How do I build an actual business? Or how do I actually build, clientele with you guys? What is it that you need, or how can I assist? And I think that's where, asking the right kind of questions and making sure that, you're a go-to person for them. If you have multiple properties in a market, that's better. I usually tell people go deep, not wide, which means you want to have a lot of properties in one little market as opposed to like being spread out so far. Agencies like to deal with people that have more properties in one specific space.
Yes. Are you basically saying like they want to know, hey, Jesse, when I call you, I need you to have something available, right? And so if you keep saying, oh, all my places are completely filled up, they're less likely to call you because it's sort of like a crapshoot with you, right?
Yep. Yeah. So most agencies will look at you. If you have 5 or more properties, you become on their like preferred provider list. You'll actually become like a preferred vendor. And that's what you want to be. You want to be a preferred vendor, not only on the healthcare side. We didn't even dive into the insurance side of stuff, but that is what's going to solidify you as being like an actual true player in that market. If you have a one-off property here and there, you're going to get bookings. I'm not going to say you're not, but if you have that portfolio of 5 or more, there's tremendous more upside of being that number one person that they go to on a regular basis. And I'm seeing this more and more where these agencies are now leaning towards like, if you don't have 5 or more properties, don't contact us. Like, that's literally what they're saying.
Wow.
So anybody that's looking to invest, you got to have multiple doors and build an actual portfolio. Think big, like from the very beginning. Like, cool, I might have my first door now, but in 2 or 3 years or 1 year, I'm going to have 5, and you build in that specific market.
I want to ask you about how you choose the market, because I think you made a very good point, is that this is not a thing that you can casually step into, which at one point it was. And so a lot of people hear the success stories from someone that says, I bought a property in X city and it does great. And then they go, oh, if I buy a property in X city, mine will do great too. And then you find out the competition is more fierce. They have a head start on you. If you can't get in with, like you're saying, a minimum of 5 properties in some markets, not everyone, but in some, it might not make sense. Probably the areas where there's the most competition, where you're making the most money. It's a very smart and helpful point, I suppose I would say, for the listeners who are like, oh, I was about to go buy one in Topeka, Kansas. Maybe I shouldn't. I need to look into it deeper. What about the specific property? I don't want to go too far down this. I just want to ask before I forget.
Yeah.
Are you always renting to one nurse? Is it always a 1-bedroom property that's best? Or are there times where having 2 or 3 bedrooms in the same property is actually beneficial?
David, that's an awesome question. So for me, I stick with 2 bedrooms and above. Any savvy investor, any intuitive investor is always going to have an exit strategy. And for me, that would be midterm first, short-term secondary, long-term being last. That gives me more exit strategies. The more beds that I have, the more opportunity that I'm going to have. Especially during COVID, we saw this a lot. And you want to be able to house those people. And if you only have a 1-bedroom, you can't. You're not going to be able to get that extra income. And agencies want to group people together. That's kind of why they connect. And a lot of times doctors will actually travel with their families. So like, we got a contract with UCSF, and I'll give you this as an example. It's a doctor that came from Europe, his family, he's got 2 kids, a dog, a wife, and they're staying in a property in San Francisco. And that's what they do. They'll pay, and they're paying $14,000 a month for a property in San Francisco, they're not paying, the agency's actually paying. And the cool thing about the agencies is you can actually get these agencies, they can be the leasees on these properties. So like in San Francisco or Central Valley, like we worry about like, holy crap, there's squatters. I don't worry about that too much, but a lot of people do. These agencies are actually the leasees, and these are multi-million-dollar agencies. There's no way they're ever going to screw you over. And that's one of the things that I love about this space too, is that they're taking responsibility for the clients that are there. They're taking ownership for that. And any damages, the agency is actually paying for it.
That is so smart. So smart, because you're not going to have a hospital that wants to take you to court and potentially be sued as much as you might have an individual that would be willing to roll the dice. It's very similar to the advice I tell people who buy in college towns and they rent out to the students. I say, don't put the student's name on the list, put their parents' name on the list. You're definitely reducing your risk by taking that approach. So we've talked about the way you get the contracts, the type of properties to look for, the level of commitment that you recommend before someone gets into certain markets. Let's talk about the actual market that you target and why you target it. So what can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so this is perfect. This is the bread and butter of this conversation, you guys. So anybody looking to get into a market, here's what I suggest you do. There's hospital levels. Each hospital has a level 1 and level 2 hospital. These are like what you typically see like on ER or Grey's Anatomy. You guys have all seen that, I'm assuming, right? It's these high acuity, a lot of like, Rob watches that all the time. So you'll have like these high acuity doctors that are there, brain surgeons, literally there's on-call people. And I usually say, look for a hospital that has 300 or more beds, and that is not including labor and delivery beds. These hospitals are going to have way more turnover. So if you look in the Bay Area alone, there's probably, I'm not kidding you, probably like 15 level 1 hospitals. These are massive. So they have a lot of people coming in and out. So level 1 and level 2 hospitals are very similar. Level 3, level 4, and level 5 hospitals, those types of hospitals are more rural, and they also have a lot of clinicians that sometimes come into these markets. So you're going to want to look at what the level is. It's going to give you a better insight on how many beds they have. It's going to tell you a little bit more about how many clinicians are actually traveling there. Look at that first. Call the hospitals if you can't get that information. It's all public knowledge. You can look it up, but just call and say, what level hospital do you have? One of the other things that I do too, you guys, is I'll actually go on Indeed.com. And if you guys are all listening to this right now, you can do the same exact thing too. Go to Indeed.com, type in Hayward, California, and whatever, travel RN, travel registered nurse. And you'll literally see, probably, I'm not kidding you, 30 or 40 different companies that are hiring for those specific people. That's going to give you mindset that, okay, cool, here's the demand in my market. This is actually legit. Like, this is today, right now information. Then I can go on Furnish Finder and I can see what the demand is on that side. So furnishfinder.com/stats will actually show you how many clinicians or how many people are actually looking for property in that market. So you have these two different angles. You have the factual data from Airbnb or from Furnish Finder, right? And then you have the Indeed or Monster Jobs, which is actually people hiring for travel nurses right now. And you can pick up the phone, and that's another way to get contracts right there, is literally just by doing a simple free Indeed search.
Are there any other creative ways that you're, I mean, it seems like you've got basically all these different places that you've kind of found on your own organically. Are there any other creative ways for getting some of these contracts or clients into your business?
There's so many creative ways, man. I can dive into a lot of them. Like the healthcare is one of them. So you guys know what Dave & Buster's is, I'm assuming, right? You guys know what that is?
Yes.
So they were building a Dave & Buster's in Modesto a while back, about 2 years ago. I saw a construction truck. I literally went there, took a picture of it, called the company and said, hey, where are your guys staying that are working here? And they were staying at Holiday Inn Express. There was 5 rooms that they were paying for. It was $1,000 a day to have these 5 dudes working at this place. They were all engineers, by the way. So I just called that agency and said, hey, I can rent you guys a property for $7,500. They can house all your people there. Like, they're literally going to be saving thousands of dollars. So there's different ways of doing things. Like, you guys have all heard of extended stay hotels.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
Okay, cool. So if you literally just drive by there at 7 p.m. at night and you take pictures of all the work trucks, extended stay hotels have literally massive contracts. They're like the #1 contracted agency with like construction companies, stuff like that. All you got to do is literally pick up the phone, take pictures at 7 at night. That's when the dudes are back or people are back at the place, right? And you just call those companies in the morning and say, hey, I noticed a work truck out there. I have properties here. Can you tell me how many rooms you guys are renting? Did you guys contract with other people? We have a safe, comfortable house that can house all your people that are working right now. I can save you money. What are you spending right now? You just start finding out information about these companies. And again, this is like the intuitive side of things. If you think outside the box, you're going to be able to build a business. And I think a lot of times people don't necessarily think that way. And these are creative ideas and ways that people can literally start building, a 6-figure business relatively pretty quick by literally just taking the time to call somebody and ask questions.
That's good, man. I love it. I love it. All right. So I don't want to go down too much a rabbit hole on this, but you did say something that really sparked. We could do a whole nother episode on this, I'm sure, but you did mention even outside of the medical industry, you talked about the insurance industry. Can you give us a little brief rundown of what you meant by that, what that means, and that entire side of the MTR business?
Yeah, so medium-term rentals in the insurance companies. So folks that are displaced from fires, floods, or any kind of catastrophic event. So just by the way, you guys, every 88 seconds in the U.S., somebody loses their property due to a fire, flood, or something like that. There's a lot of these claims. So there's companies like ALE Solutions, Dan Housing. These are like two large-scale agencies. And what they do is if somebody loses a property, they have to relocate them right away. These agencies are actually paying, it could be 10% of the property value that they lost per month. So if somebody has a $1 million house, they're paying 10% of that per month on housing for them. So, that's over 10 grand a month that they're specifically paying for these properties. So that's a huge play. It's been something for me that's been able to grow tremendously. With just 2 properties, I can cash flow 10K a month off just 2 insurance claims. And all these things that we were talking about a second ago, building relationships, connecting with these folks. There's somebody called a relocation specialist, and you guys can all go on LinkedIn right now and you guys can all look up these people. Relocation specialists are basically the hounds, the bird dogs for these families to find another property. So if you connect with them, you build rapport with them, they're going to send you these clients.
Can you clarify really fast? You said 10%. Does that mean if on $1 million house, roughly they'll give you $100,000 a year for a housing allowance?
Yeah, every housing allowance is going to be different, but yeah, so that's how you can look at it a year. Is if the family lost a $1 million property, they're going to be able to give you $100,000 for that year. So for me in the Central Valley, I have properties that are $1,500 to $2K a month, and we're renting it for $8,000. Like I'm cash flowing literally $5K a month from one property. And people are doing this all over the US in a lot of different places. David, you're in the Bay Area, same thing. Most properties are over 1 million, 2 million. So these companies are paying, 14K, like I mentioned in San Francisco, 9K in Oakland, Berkeley, we have 11K. So you can get substantial income even in markets that are urban, that are more expensive. And that's through building relationships.
Jesse, on working with these insurance, relocation specialists, are there any tips that you might have for building rapport with them?
Yep. So what I typically do is I'll get on a call with them and I'll say, hey, do you guys have 5 minutes that I can have a conversation with you and your entire staff? And they will say like yes or no or whatever. So I want to get on a Zoom call with them. So what I'll do is we have this beautiful thing in this world called DoorDash, right? You guys have heard of that? So I'll actually find out what office they're working in. I will find out every single person that's working in that office, what their name is, what their favorite Starbucks drink is, how hot they like their Starbucks drink. And I'll literally order Instacart or DoorDash food to them, get on a 5-minute presentation, talk about my properties. I will literally have everybody's email, favorite Starbucks drink, and that's how I'll build my business. It's almost like you're meeting somebody in person, but you're talking to them over the phone. So for me, that's again, thinking intuitively, you guys, is not a lot of people think like that. Me coming from my background of being in healthcare, and this is what I did for a living. It's the same kind of concept. You want to build relationships. You want to be cute, but not forgettable, right? You want to be somebody that they're not going to forget about. And I promise you now, most people listening to this, those relocation specialists aren't getting Starbucks drinks. People aren't buying them, Dunkin' Donuts. We're thinking different. We're building a business and a brand. And I think that at the end of the day, you have to think about those things and just get 5 minutes. That's all you need is 5 minutes with somebody to talk about what you're doing and how you can help them.
I want to highlight something I think you're doing so much better than other people that have not had as much success. It comes down to the mindset and the approach you're taking, because you're approaching this as a business, not a replacement for work. So many people get into real estate investing because they don't like their job and they're like, all right, I just want to get a couple houses and never have to work again. Once I've bought the properties, I'm done. You're describing it so clearly, and it really is simple. It's not a complicated strategy, but it isn't easy. It doesn't just fall into your lap, right? You got to do a little bit of work. Learn their Starbucks drink, learn what Instacart is, learn what DoorDash is, learn how to use Zoom. Have a clear delivery when you go to this half-hour meeting that you explain what properties you have. You probably have a slideshow that's prepared or something that they can see pictures of what they look like so they can feel comfortable here. In my opinion, the future of real estate investing looks more like what you're describing than what it's looked like looking back over the last 20 years, which was buy it, set it, forget it. It now is going to require an active role if you want to stay on top. And we should be very grateful for that, by the way, because if this wasn't the case, Blackstone would buy every single property and push us all out of it, and we wouldn't be able to have a business anymore, right? It's these detailed nuances that allow us to compete with the big dogs. And that is why podcasts like this are so important, because you can learn these sort of like techniques that work in other parts of business that will also work in real estate. Okay, Jesse, you've mentioned Instacart. You've mentioned offering rental cars, like everything you can do to make this convenience. I keep highlighting everything you say that's good. It's brilliant. You're talking about customer service. You're not saying, I want to buy a property so I don't have to cater to people. You're saying, I'm going to buy a property and cater to people through that property, which gives you an edge. What other amenities can people be thinking about that will improve their odds of being successful? Is design super important? Are there little details or things that can be left in a house that will improve the actual experience a person's having so that they go to their HR department and say, I loved it, I want to stay with them again? What are you doing?
Yep. Yeah. So there's two things I want to highlight here, David. As more regulations come into place on the short-term side, you're going to see more investors looking at the midterm rental space. Right now, the U.S., only 3% of the entire U.S. is regulated by short-term rental regulations in municipalities. 3%. And it's expected, I was just reading a study, it's expected to actually triple this year. So you're going to see more people that have these beautiful, sexy, Rob, like you, Airbnbs that are going to get regulated. Then what are you going to do next? Oh, I'm going to midterm it. So you're going to start seeing a lot of these properties come into this space that are beautiful, sexy, that have all these cool things in there. But at the end of the day, you want to be very thoughtful and insightful on design. You want to be, most places on Furnish Finder, and everybody listening to this right now, if you go on Furnish Finder, it looks like most properties on there look like it was a hand-me-down, somebody lost their family member and they decided to put that property, grandma's house, on Furnish Finder. Literally, that's what they look like. So right now is a competitive edge where you can have a pretty decent looking property. You're probably going to do well. So you want to make sure you design it with intuition as far as what kind of clients you're going to go after. If you're going to have nurses, you want to have blackout curtains. David, you brought this up a minute ago. Nurses work from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. They work the graveyard shift. Guess what they're doing during the day? They're sleeping. So you want to have blackout curtains. Box fans are really important. I've had so many requests for box fans. We have those in all of our properties now. Noise machines. Really think about, the design, think about the little amenities that are going to help them sleep at night or during the day.
As a former police officer who also had to sleep during the day for much of my career, I can say with a resounding yes to everything you just mentioned. The box fans are huge. It's hotter during the day, right? So it needs to be cooler. Yep. And they may not want to run the AC or may not be able to get the room cool enough to be able to sleep. And it drowns out all the noise. And I still have blackout curtains in my room because it was so hard to sleep when the sun was up. So these are things that that set you apart from the competition that can only happen at the micro level. That's what's so important, I think, about the information you're giving and the strategy you have is it's micromanaged, which puts the power in the hands of the investor as opposed of the huge freaking corporation that can go buy 3,000 properties in every major city and just try to push us out so that we can't make a living like this.
Yeah. Well, David, there's actually REITs like Greystar. All these big companies are actually in the medium-term rental space. I don't know if you knew that or not. Over the last 6 months, they're actually allocating a certain amount of properties. And we've also saw this with Airbnb, right? They're allowing medium-term rentals in their properties. So they're actually doing the same exact thing as that I'm talking about here, just not on that super intuitive level. So we're going to see more and more of this happening. And eventually one day, my goal is to have such a big portfolio that smart institutional money comes in and buys my property and they buy my book of business. That's something to think about. That's my exit strategy for me thinking later on is I have, I was talking to a friend. I'll talk about this real quick. This guy owns 200 doors in the Midwest. I'm literally making just as much as he is with 200 doors with literally 10 properties. Literally 10 properties. So if you do things the right way and you're really intuitive about it, you can make a pretty substantial amount of money. It does take more work though. David, you mentioned it perfectly. Like it takes more work and most investors are not willing to put in that work.
All right, Jesse, I have so many more questions, but we are getting towards the end here. But I'm sure that one of the more common things you hear are the squatters, Jesse. I see those comments all the time on midterm rental and medium-term rental comments or on YouTube videos and on threads. Do you make your tenants, whether they're through Furnish Finders or through Airbnb, do they all still have to sign leases?
Yep. Yeah, they absolutely have to sign leases. And we have addendums that say that they're there for a specific amount of time, that they're not considered long-term tenants, even though they are there for over 30 days. But again, go back to what I talked about earlier, you guys, most of these contracts that I get, these agencies are the leasees. So I don't have to necessarily worry too much about, and these folks are professional too, by the way. You're not going to have a nurse that's going to squat at your property. You're not going to have, guys that are working for Dave & Buster's, these engineers, they're not going to just be like, oh, we're not going to pay. So I think you got to screen people just like you do with long-term. It's the exact same kind of concept. I think people just take this to way an extreme in a what if scenario. And most of the time, this doesn't happen on a regular basis. And it can, yes, it can, but you got to protect yourself in a way that if you can get these agencies to be the leasees, awesome. But you just got to do regular screening that you typically do with every other, tenant that you have.
The Airbnb version of it is, okay, so long-term rentals are, what do you do if the toilet overflows? Mid-term rentals are, but what about the squatters? And then Airbnb is, but what about an LLC? Do I need an LLC? Those are the three main questions I hear in all of real estate.
Toilets, LLCs, and squatters have cost people more money than anything else that I know of in my career. Those concerns about toilets. Yeah. There always is going to be a challenge, but you have to learn to enjoy the challenge, because if it wasn't for the challenge, you wouldn't have the opportunity. If it was super easy and nothing went wrong, people with more money than you would have already stepped in and taken all the opportunity, and there'd be nothing left. It's these little tiny paper cuts that are annoying that stop people from being able to do it at scale. And so as the mom and pop investors, the people that are listening to our podcast that are all trying to find financial freedom through real estate, are looking for opportunities, you actually should be attracted to and drawn to the obstacles to success that you may find, because that means you're going to have an opportunity where if it becomes too easy to do it, you will be pushed out. And we've seen this over and over and over through so many different industries that, like, I actually feel better about something like this, Jesse, and the method you're describing, because it sounds safer and like it's a more defensively sound option. Compare that to buying a 400 unit apartment complex that some massive corporation can buy, hire one property management company to take care of it and do nothing. That's going to be much harder for the small person to be able to get into that space than this one.
Totally. 100% agree. And you're going to start seeing more of this stuff happen. I think about medium term rentals as Airbnb in 2007. There's no property management software out for it. There's no price labs. These companies aren't necessarily making anything for it. So imagine being able to know where Airbnb is now. This is where we're at in this space. Like, I feel like Airbnb is in the fifth inning, right? It's been around for a while. They're pushing experiences now, unique properties. And going back to baseball terms, like, I feel like the medium term rental space, like, the umpires are barely walking the field. They're just chalking the field. Grounds crews out. Like, that's how early we are in the game. And the sooner that you get in, the better you build your foundations, the likelihood of you being able to succeed in the space is tremendous. And I think there's just so much opportunity for people, and they might not necessarily see it like that, but I do. I'm all about, like, skating to where the puck is going. And, like, I see that, the bend is there. So that's just my 2 cents.
Fantastic, man. I'm glad that we had you here to share this information before anybody else heard it. This has been really good.
Famous for.
We're going to move on to the next segment of our show. It is the Famous Four. At this segment of the show, Rab and I will take turns asking you the same 4 questions we ask every guest every episode. Question number 1 will come from me, and that is, what is your favorite real estate book?
My favorite real estate book is called Loopholes in Real Estate. That was the first book I ever read in real estate, and it was basically like tax stuff. It was how to find your first property. It was part of the Rich Dad, Poor Dad series. You guys probably never heard of it. It's not really that huge of a book, but that was, for me, my introduction to actually investing in real estate. And I kind of go back to it every now and then. So it's called Loopholes of Real Estate.
Awesome. And number 2, what's your favorite business book?
Favorite business book is The E-Myth. So The E-Myth, I'm sure you guys have heard it. It is about removing yourself from your business. And that's where I'm at in my life, is only doing the things that I'm uniquely qualified to do. And everything else is going to be delegated to people that can handle it. And that's going to allow me more time, me to actually focus on the actual business. In order to grow an actual legitimate business, you can't be the guy that's doing everything all the time, everywhere, all at once. It's impossible.
Great book. Would love to read it someday. Number 3, hobbies. What do you do whenever you're not out there crushing the midterm rental game?
I play guitar. I love playing guitar, drums, bass, guitar. Baseball. I'm a big baseball fan. I still play baseball even at 40 years young. I still skateboard, you guys. I can still kickflip. I have younger kids. I still go out and skateboard with them. So I stay young and hip and still like a cool dad, So those are my hobbies.
It's always funny when we ask the hobby question of anyone that has kids. It's like the biggest struggle ever to try to find anything to say, because I think when you have kids, they are your hobby. Like, you're like, I do real estate. That's my hobby. I freaking have kids. What do you expect out of me here? All right. My last question for you. What sets apart successful investors from those who give up, fail, or never get started?
Yep. I think grit and having a mindset that is going to keep you going is extremely important. I think a lot of times most of us will run into an obstacle, and you just talked about it earlier, David. those little, those finger cuts, those simple things that people are just like, oh, I'm not going to do this anymore. Like, it's about being consistent. The more consistent you are, the more reps that you have, the more opportunities that you have. And I think that being able to build a business takes time, it takes energy, and it takes consistency.
Amazing. Well, Jesse, tell us where people can find out more about you on the interwebs, Instagram, YouTube, all that kind of stuff.
Yep. Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at The Real Jesse Vasquez. I have a website, therealjessevasquez.com. And YouTube, you can type in Jesse Vasquez on there as well. So, and one little quick thing, if you guys don't mind me saying this, there's a midterm rental summit coming up. I've actually linked up with Furnish Finder. It's going to be April 30th to May 1st in San Diego at the Mission Bay Resort. So head over to MTR Summit or the midtermrentalsummit.com to pick up your ticket. I'm extremely excited about Furnish Finder jumping on with me, and we're hosting this first ever midterm rental event.
Very cool. Everybody go follow Jesse. Jesse, you are one of those people that you're frustratingly smart and very good at this. And I learned so much from you. And I'm always like, I wish I could be that smart. Your content is really great, very knowledgeable. So thanks so much for coming to share. David, where can people come and find you if they want to get in touch, connect, do all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, please do. You can find me on Instagram or everywhere on social media at David Green 24. There's the E at the end of Green. And now you can find me on YouTube there as well. So youtube.com/@DavidGreen24 will take you to my YouTube channel. And there's real estate agent advice. There's loan officer stuff. There's investor stuff. There's walkthroughs of my properties. There's all kinds of cool content as I'm trying to become more like Rob and less like me. Rob, how about you?
You can find me over on YouTube at Rob Built and Instagram at Rob Built. And lastly, if you like this episode, if this episode got you fired up about MTRs, which I know it did, and if it was useful and you want to get into the medium-term rental game, then consider leaving us a 5-star review on the Apple Podcast app or wherever you listen to your podcast. The 5 stars really help us get served up to new audiences so we can teach other people how to get into the medium-term rental game and the real estate game all around. So that's it. Please leave us a 5-star review. Would mean the world to us.
All right. And that is our show for today. Jesse, thank you so much for being here, man. This is one of the better interviews I think that we've ever done. Tons of good information. You're a very good communicator. I hope everybody goes and follows you. And I'll be reaching out to you myself because I am a budding medium-term investor myself. I've got 3 properties being rehabbed that should be coming online. So I'm going to get your information and make sure we stay in touch. And maybe we can have you back on and we can kind of share what's been going on with my properties and how you coached me, what I did. That could be a cool experience that we could have. This is David Green for Rob, the short-term specialist Abasolo, signing off.